This just in, it's officially fall, and that means a lot of things to a lot of people. The leaves are changing colors. It's time to break out the pumpkins, break out the football.
And most importantly, break out the Truly hard seltzer. See, Truly has only 100 calories, but has 5% ABV and only 1 gram of sugars per container. It's the can't-miss drink of the season, so try Truly hard seltzer today. Truly. Drink what you truly want.
Hello, Futurelings. This is Ken.
And this is John.
We're going to take a second here before the show begins to celebrate the holiday winter solstice season.
The solstice.
The solstice, we call it. It's like the Soviets.
The poultice.
If you put a poultice on a Soviet because he's turning red, it's a solstice. Just to mention that with the advent of the holiday season in late November 2019.
I like how you threw Advent in there. That's nice.
Yeah, it's just a lot of subtle Christianity every time I talk. I'm offended by the Starbucks cups that don't have a manger on them.
Every day I open a little door in Ken and I get another tiny piece of chocolate.
We were so thankful for your support around the Thanksgiving season that we, after months of putting it off, we finally rolled out a series of delightful benefits and rewards for those who have supported the show.
We've been so grateful for the Patreon support of our program. It has eased our transition away from our former corporate masters and made us feel like independent operators and futurelings ourselves. And so we wanted to give back in this time of giving and actually have Patreon levels that have different rewards.
So give yourself the gift of perks this holiday season.
What are some of our perks, Ken?
Well, anybody who
Perkmaster.
donates at any of the Patreon tiers receives probably the main perk, which is a monthly omnibus episode of Addenda that goes reader feedback, pointing out corrections and addictions, possibly.
A lot of presentlings have information they'd like to share with us about various topics. Sometimes it's because they live in the town that we discussed. Sometimes it's because they are lopodiatrists.
If there's one thing all Omnibus listeners have in common, it's they have information to share.
So we
wanted to make sure that went in the time capsule as well.
That's right. We're going to cover all the bases. And so it's a fun listen, a fascinating listen.
A new monthly episode available to all our donors at higher donation levels. You get access to a image archive, show notes, and mailbag oddities and whatnot.
You're going to be astonished by the difference between our show notes.
Mine are in pencil and John's are in ink.
That's basically it.
That's the main
Ken's
one.
are legible and mine are not.
John's have pentagrams on them.
Often do.
At even higher tiers, you can get an autographed copy of those show notes mailed to you, or even the ability to choose a show topic and rocket your preferred omnibus idea to the top of the queue.
Yeah, we're going to try and make that as difficult as possible for you to achieve, but it is a perk.
It may be collaborative if your idea is terrible or offensive, or even video chats with the two of us. So go to patreon.com/omnibusproject. See what tempts you, what tickles your fancy, what craveable new benefits there are for you to enjoy.
Crave.
My favorite word.
Moist.
Happy holidays, everyone. Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus.
You have accessed entry 1211.JB2111. Certificate number 42537. Square dancing.
Everybody join hands, circle up, feet and aid, hand rings, circle to the left. Reverse, single file, lady in the lead. When you get back home, face the partner, dose-to-dose.
Element
Now
left.
turn to the corner.
Do your partner. Then your corner gal. Cast your mind back, if you will, back to middle school.
I'm right there.
We should explain that in our, people always want, scientists are interested in the mating rituals of other species.
Right, of course.
So we should explain that a weird and arbitrary courtship ritual of our era and our species, at least in this culture, was to take the allotted time of day in which young people normally did sports and fitness, and for 1 week a year, make them do kind of an archaic and arbitrary dance form.
That can't possibly survive even unto now, right? We were part of some
experiment.
Some late 70s, early 80s retro fad, like hee-haw based appreciation of Appalachian culture.
I could not. We get in trouble, by the way, when we say Appalachian. All the Appalachians write in and say you need to say Appalachian, and I'm not going to say that.
You know, I have a good friend whose parents are from Tennessee who named her Appalachia.
Really?
And she goes by Apple, but she is not called Appalachia.
Well, does she spell it like a fruit, or does she spell it Appal, like a Paul?
She spells it like the mountain range.
So Appal.
Yeah,
that's weird.
Appalachia.
Excuse me, a Paul? I have your latte. A Paul?
Appalachia. I mean, it's just. I think it depends on whether you're in Kentucky or Tennessee, doesn't it? Or
do you think there are some parts of the Appalachia/Atchins where there's a divide? Do you think there's a line?
I do. I don't think they say Appalachia in North Carolina.
Maybe that's what the Hatfields and the McCoys were fighting about.
That might be.
They were on opposite sides of the vowel line.
I'm willing to get my blunderbuss out and stand on one side of
it's like long creek. A. Somebody's holding a pitchfork and yelling long A, and some guy with a hoe is yelling short A. Well, I would have thought the same thing too, that this was a relic, but I recently discovered that here in urban Seattle, Washington, of all places, my middle school kids were still doing a square dance unit every year in PE.
Really? What?
I guess,
what is square dance teaching us?
For 38 weeks, you need to do sports and fitness. For 1 week, you need to hold a parachute.
Right. Oh, that was the best.
Every kid loves the parachute.
Oh, the parachute was the best.
We should do a show on World War II surplus parachutes.
Yeah. For those who didn't experience this long in the future, probably we're talking to sentient octopuses that basically are parachutes.
You could definitely hold a big circular piece of cloth
all by yourself.
In your many tents. Yeah, you could do the whole thing.
But what we used to do in gym class was the entire class would have a World War II surplus, and not a vented parachute or anything, but just a circular...
Surround a big circular cloth.
And it has a hole in the middle.
Like you're pitching a circus big top.
And then we would all lift it up, kind of like we were doing an Eskimo Olympics blanket toss.
Wait, a what? An EOBT?
Yeah.
Is that the thing?
Well, so there are a lot of...
This is now a digression from the digression.
When I was a kid, there was, and I think this still exists, but the Eskimo Olympics were like a sporting event that happened once a year in Alaska, where all the people from all the villages came, and they did all of these sports that were unique to the residents of the northern part of Alaska, or the coastal.
This is actually Inuit people doing the events, or is it a bunch of white kids?
No.
Calling their tundra activities Eskimo Olympics.
It was real, people from the villages.
Huh.
And the sports were crazy. Like there was one where they hang a little kind of a hacky sack, a ball from a string, and the game was to try and kick it with both feet
at the same time
from a standing position.
So you're just doing flying drop kicks at a hacky sack.
At a hacky sack that's basically standing. You're not running up to it. It's standing and it's hanging from the string. You're standing in front of it, and you just kick it.
This is basically how Luke Skywalker learned to use the Force.
And then they raise the ball, like
so whoever can, it's like the limbo.
Whoever can kick the ball the highest. And then blanket toss was a thing where, you get a bunch of people around a circular blanket, or I think originally like a skin. and then everyone pulls at the same time, and you fly. I mean, they catapult you into the air. I've done it.
I've seen it done with a picnic blanket, never with a walrus skin, but I kind of liked it.
You know, there's 30 people around it. So when everybody pulls at once and when they're really clicked in, they can send you flying.
I just like this on YouTube videos of drunk people wiping out. That's my faces of death is watching blanket toss go awry. But yeah, so the parachute variant of it, you would just kind of lift it into the air, and it would become a dome and then waft down.
Well, and then you would climb inside.
Well, sometimes you could, and you could sit on it. I went to one school where you were not allowed to go under the parachute. I don't know what had happened.
That was the best part of it.
It was probably named for the kid that screwed it up for everybody else. The Scott B rule.
Because we
can't go under the parachute.
When you go under it and pull it down, then it retains air for a long time and just gradually sinks down on top of you.
And you're in a multicolored dome. Often it had weird colored stripes.
Maybe it was as the thing collapsed, a couple of kids started necking, and then they wouldn't come out.
That's usually when you can't do something at school, it's because somebody was necking.
Somebody screwed it up by necking.
So, but there was also a week of square, and my kids still do it. I was asking, both my kids went to the same middle schools here, but nope, it's the same thing. They turn on some old timey sound clip of a caller saying, "Element left with your corner gal."
Right.
And
basically doing the same like auctioneer patter.
Yeah. My daughter is maybe one of the taller girls, so she always gets paired with the tallest guy.
Yeah.
But she's past the age where she would dwarf him. So now she's always just dancing with some 6-foot guy. Square dancing. And recently, just a couple weeks ago, my kids went to a church youth Halloween activity, and we had not told them that we had gotten the email saying that the Halloween activity was going to center around square dancing.
Wow.
And I know this makes it seem like Mormons are weirdos who don't observe Halloween but have to do some lame harvest festival instead. This is not true.
Is that right?
Mormons dress up and trick or treat or whatever.
Okay,
but
good.
somebody at some level thought, what would be fun for our little thing is to do a barn dance.
Of course.
So we told the kids, well, we'll drop you off at the church. What's the activity? I don't know. I think it's Halloween themed.
Well, it's interesting about American culture in particular, and this was super true when I was a kid, that the rest of the year we don't really think about. We don't really think about the colonial era. We do around 4th of July when we're reminded of the Boston Tea Party.
But hardly in no cultural ways.
Yeah,
nobody wears a 3-cornered hat.
No, we just sort of
plays a fife.
But those are that's some of the imagery, right? The fife player, the drummer, and the flag bearer. But really around harvest time, we go crazy for not colonial America, but like post-colonial America, right? The headless horseman, the pumpkins, the sleigh rides. I mean, those are all sort of 1830s to 1850s cultural notions. Thanksgiving being, we do the pilgrim thing, we do the 1600 culture. But it's really from an 1850s lens.
Yeah, and Thanksgiving is a revival too.
Right.
That's a late 19th century. We should have that. Yeah, I guess it's just when some...
It's a revival of a revival.
Yeah, we always talk about these waves of nostalgia, the 70s for the 50s and currently for the 80s or 90s.
But in the 70s, we had nostalgia for the 1880s, nostalgia for the 1720s.
It just got stuck to the calendar. Well, this is the story about why... It's what I want to walk you through, the weird way in which square dancing became part of our modern vernacular. Because you're right. Many countries have a vibrant folk dancing tradition.
Right.
I'm just going to assume that if I'm in Lithuania, it wouldn't be weird for my school to have a troupe that does Lithuanian folk dancing. And that's a cultural event where people will come to see or Greece or Shenyun in China.
So I was in Estonia earlier this year, and they have what's called the Song Festival. And in fact, their sort of traditional dancing and singing is widely regarded as how they maintained an Estonian identity throughout the Russian period, because it wasn't just a Soviet period. The Russians were in the Baltics for centuries, trying to just exterminate the Baltic regional cultures. Not exterminate, but they made Russian language mandatory. They just
you always do, teach it in the schools.
Yeah, they tried to assimilate those countries, and it was really the song and dance of the Baltic peoples that preserved their culture. So now they really celebrate it. And
there's costumes.
There's costumes. There's very elaborate dances that involve hundreds of people dancing synchronously.
Is that both synchronously and erroneously?
It's synchronously and erroneously, synchronously.
It's so good, it's felonious.
and it's kind of phenomenal. It's weirdly nationalist too. And that's the problematic thing about
what are they just chanting about how no Turkish immigrants as they do it?
Well, no, but that is the thing about like a kind of native dance when you're talking about a Baltic or a Balkan country. It is also, these are the songs of our ethnic people.
This is how we kicked out the Ottomans and the Slavs and the Tartars or whoever.
But it doesn't really invite the recent Somali immigrants to also participate in this, very, very like dialectic kind of.
Hey, they could join, I guess. Really? You'd let some Somali guy wear the costume? Oh, no.
Not really. I mean, they could wear the costume of the they could wear the costume of the Moor, right?
So there's a weird tension when you have a folk dance. It's not just like, yay, this is who we are. Let's remember our ancestors. But there is some element of this is who we were compared to others, and this is kind of the image we want to preserve.
Right.
And as you say, that can be leveraged for suspect reasons, which is kind of relevant to the story of square dancing, in fact. I didn't know any of this until very recently. I happened to see this is not something that will exist in 10 years, so this is really going to date the show, but I saw kind of a tweet thread by a writer named Robin Panacchia kind of ranting about the origins of square dance.
Let's hope that it doesn't, but 10 years ago, I don't think we would have said tweets will survive until 2020.
They stopped putting them in the Library of Congress. So,
oh, is that right?
Yeah, remember for a while they were going to archive every tweet.
I published a book of my tweets.
You did. I wonder if it's a Trump era thing.
I didn't do it.
Where people
someone did it.
Right. If you did it, that would have been sad.
That's weird. That would have been
Luckily,
weird.
someone else
it was
reached
a
out
publisher,
to you.
Yeah.
Others were interested. But yeah, I think it's a Trump era thing where people have decided
these are no longer.
We don't want to maybe incentivize identifying the government with its Twitter identity.
Right. But you were saying,
but yeah, this writer does this kind of long, a Wongcat writer does this long rant about the origins of square dancing, and later wrote it up for Quartz. And I started reading up on it, and I was shocked and appalled at what I considered to be just a pure and innocent art form. For one thing, square dancing really doesn't exist. I mean, when we say square dancing, we could mean different things. Like literally, it could be any dance you would do in a square, a four-sided form with a different couple on each side. So 4 couples that then do whatever moves you can do across a square and to the toward your left corner, toward your right corner, and so forth.
And I saw this a lot in watching these Estonian dances. They
were little geometrical
couples in forms where they traded partners and they went around in circles. I mean, very much square dancing.
It originates in Europe, in like Restoration era England, and even before. A lot of the kind of country dances, courtly dances you would do at a party. If you've seen a Jane Austen movie or something, a lot of those have those strict geometrical forms.
It's a way to touch someone of the opposite sex in a pretty straight-laced period.
And to be honest, that's probably a lot of what it's being leveraged for in middle school. Right. This idea that this will teach some basic level of courtesy to the opposite sex.
Sure.
As you're navigating that weird divide between ignoring the opposite sex and just obsessing about, if you're heterosexual, the opposite sex.
But also forcing kids off of the wall of the dance and into the center, which in a way is kind of a public service. As someone who spent...
I was a wall hugger.
Yeah, most of the middle school hugging the wall.
My signature move was to offer to help out with the tickets. Because then you could hang out front and you could talk to people.
Right.
But you weren't going to have to hug the corners of the gym when the slow dance started.
It's amazing to think back at the hugging the wall, and girls would stare at you, come walk around and stare at me. But I was terrified of being rejected by them, that even though it's a dance with the sole purpose of dancing, and someone is standing there looking at you, basically saying, "Ask me to dance," they could never, of course, ask me to dance. And I don't think I asked a single girl to dance in all of middle school. I just stood there on the side and played Devo songs in my head.
Right. Take My Breath Away by Berlin starts, and I stare at my shoes. To this day, I'll do it. If I hear Take My Breath Away, I'll just stare at my shoes.
That's the difference in our age, because
it's not that big, but
yeah, but Take My Breath Away was certainly like high school for me.
It's in, what is that, 86? It's in Top Gun. 86, right?
Yeah, middle school would have been, for me, it would have been like Blondie.
Yeah.
Still like roller skate music.
So that's what you get the couples out on the floor. And so the idea that we have that square dancing is kind of a country-ish barn dance really has nothing to do with its squareness. Like technically a square dance is any dance you do in a square.
Right. That could be very fancy.
Yeah. A French quadrille is a square dance. And to this day, different regions of America have different traditions. In New England, the traditional square dances that are preserved by the lobster men or whatever are now futurelings. These are not men who are half lobster.
Right.
In our time.
Or even men who are whole lobsters.
Right. Men with the proportions of lobsters or vice versa. People who catch lobsters in traps. Sorry. Trigger warning. They'll do these kind of French quadrille inspired dances.
That are very mannered.
Yeah. I mean, the Appalachian ones that we imagine probably come more from
clogging.
Maybe a Gael. Yeah, there's clogging. The Irish Ceilidh has square shaped dances. So those that Scotch Irish tradition would have come into the Appalachian dance.
Stop doing that.
I don't want to get the letters.
I'm going to be the Appalachian talker here.
Send John the letters.
Yeah.
In the Southeast, honestly, the call and response kind of tradition in square dance where someone says something and then everybody does it, that comes from an African-American tradition, so that's what you would see in kind of a Louisiana style square dance. But none of this gets us close to the cowboy kind of square dancing, which is the culture we associate it with it today.
Right. And it has evolved into line dancing, right? That's where all that energy went in trying to keep it modern, trying to keep it. I mean, if you think about the Macarena, it's essentially a square dance that has spread out into a line.
All these dance crazes just exist to make dances easy to learn.
Right.
You don't know how to, you don't feel, you're too inhibited to kind of just
let it ride.
Dance like nobody's watching. Like, let me tell you.
People have so much fun doing them in lines, and there's something, I guess, really appealing about watching everyone do something that's super synchronized.
I like watching the wave at a sports event.
Yeah.
I'm awful.
Do you stand up and do the wave? Do you ever let a wave pass where you don't join?
No, I always catch a wave.
Yeah, me too.
I'll always do YMCA. And if somebody's doing the Macarena, it's very hard not to do the Macarena.
I won't do YMCA, but I won't do the Macarena.
You have a YMCA line?
Well, I mean, I did it so much when YMCA was like on the platter that I feel like now I can't.
Just say it's appropriation of gay culture. You cannot, in good conscience,
I can't do it.
Do the YMCA.
That's why I can't do the Macarena either.
But this idea, 28 of 50 U.S. states, I believe, now have this kind of Western style square dancing as an official state dance.
What?
Square dancing is the official state dance by decree of state legislators in the majority of American states.
I say again, what?
And clearly it's a dance that can't exist. To the degree that there's a folk dance of the American plains and Rocky Mountains, it would be Native American dances.
Sure.
It would be
Hopi dance.
It would be warn dances and rain dances and Hopi and Navajo dances. And yet we kind of say, oh yeah, here's what's indigenous to this region. A bunch of stacked bales of hay and a guy with a fiddle.
Right, gingham shirts.
Gingham shirts.
But that is that weird frontier nostalgia.
Yeah.
That I think people in certainly the southern half of the United States really cling to as a contemporary identity. Right. That's the natural American self. Like unencumbered by radio and TV.
And of course, it's pretty much invented. It's as invented as any as the twist or the Macarena or any 20th century invention. In fact, it kind of is a 20th century invention. You were talking about this kind of early 19th century nostalgia for sleigh rides and Currier and Ives and whatnot.
She'll be coming around the mountain.
Washington Irving. So this kind of goes back to Henry Wadsworth Longfellow.
Of course, everything does.
Is that right to you? Everything goes back to Longfellow?
For me, yeah.
So in 1923, Henry Ford, very interested in Americana, started buying up just acres and acres of the land around Sudbury, Massachusetts. And he even bought the Wayside Inn, which was a beloved old building where Longfellow had set his Tales from a Wayside Inn. It's kind of a American colonial Canterbury Tales kind of a thing where a bunch of people on a cold night surround a fire at this New England inn and tell stories.
Right.
And they tell famous stories. You know, Paul Revere's Ride, Listen, My Child, and You Shall Hear.
Right. That's his big one, right?
Yeah, that's his greatest hits.
Did they all do the Song of Hiawatha? Because that's a little bit harder to...
Yeah, they had the Indian chief guy from Village People come in, and they all did the Hiawatha dance. But Paul Revere's Ride comes from Tales of a Wayside Inn. And, in the early 20th century...
it still existed, the Wayside Inn.
It's still... Henry Ford was its last private owner. Spoilers. A board of trustees later took it over, and now it's some kind of public historical site. I think maybe a state one. Mm-hmm. But Henry Ford really wanted to have this kind of it's the same impulse I think you see in Walt Disney 20 or 30 years later, trying to create this American Main Street in Anaheim, California.
Right.
He wanted to have this kind of preserved, just beautiful New England town with all of our old traditions, our churning butter and our catching lobster and our bobsled rides or whatever.
Right.
And the Wayside Inn has this beautiful ballroom. And Henry Ford wants to have dances there. He hires a guy named Benjamin B. Lovett, who's a folk dancing expert of some kind, to come in and teach him square dances. Uh-huh. And he loves learning square dances with Mrs. Ford, and he thinks, wouldn't it be great if others could have the same benefit I have? But they can't call on Benjamin Lovett. So he goes back to Michigan, and he builds Lovett Hall, this big, beautiful ballroom with a teak floor on his property. And he has dances and parties. He's one of the richest men in America.
Did they also reinstitute the stocks in the like out in front of these places?
If anybody would, it would be Henry Ford, right?
Put a scarlet letter on.
They burn a witch every what is it called? Samhain. And of course, because he's Henry Ford, he's got tens of thousands of employees whose culture he is trying to influence.
Right.
So all the employees now have breaks to learn square dancing.
He's making them eat hot cereal every morning for their constitution.
Yes, he's got a theory about yogurt and he's got a theory about square dancing. And he publishes a book. Maybe somebody approached him, like with your tweets, or maybe this is totally a vanity effort. But in 1926, he publishes Good Morning, after this, there's a subtitle.
Good morning, colon.
Here's
your bowl of hot cereal.
No, it's a very lengthy subtitle. So imagine the book says, Good morning,
yes.
And then in smaller type, after a sleep of 25 years, old-fashioned dancing is being revived by Mr. and Mrs. Henry Ford.
A sleep of only 25 years?
I don't know why. I guess he thought that the turn of the century, all this kind of barbershop-y stuff had ended.
I have mustard in my refrigerator that's 25 years old.
Certainly, if you go to your parents' house today, futurelings, and you open the medicine cabinet, nothing will be younger than 25 years.
So what he's responding to is the flapper era. He doesn't like short hair on women, and he doesn't like all this jazz music.
It's cultural retrenchment. Let me get to that in a second. Right. But yes, given what we know about Henry Ford, you would not be surprised to hear that he thinks things were better. 25 years, that's when he was a young man.
Right.
So it's as
before
it ever
Clara
was.
Everybody's
saying, I didn't have YouTubers and I turned out just fine. Right. Or it goes back to Socrates.
Video games.
And he this becomes a real social cause for Henry. He will always get on a radio mic and tell America how if you don't have square dancing, your youth will be deficient when it comes to manners and courtesy and social training. So it is the opposite sex stuff.
He was literally the first one to go, automobile.
Yeah, he introduced megaphones. The Model T was originally just a megaphone factory that he repurposed. And he even gets a radio show.
Henry Ford.
Yeah, you can turn on your radio dial in the late 20s and listen to early American dance music led by Mr. Benjamin Lovett, who becomes Henry Ford's kind of cultural stand-in, leading the Henry Ford Orchestra.
Wow.
There's a Henry Ford Orchestra playing barn dance music.
Wow.
And of course, he wants the kids to
Does he
do
host
things.
it? I mean, he's not famous for his charisma.
No, I can't imagine him hosting it, right? But his name is on it. He's the celebrity, and I'm sure he's pouring money into it, right? He's the sponsor, and he wants to get it in schools as well. So this becomes an educational movement.
It's so strange because I think of it as being so lowbrow, square dancing.
Yes,
And these are people I would assume were always aspiring to be a highbrow.
for most of the 20th century, the ideal American life in everybody's minds, even if they lived in and loved cities, was some beautiful little Main Street USA in Missouri.
Right.
And like that was kind of everybody's default utopia. It's like half the Twilight Zone. I think we talked about this. Half every Twilight Zone episode, like the afterlife or the dream utopia is
Small town America.
Just some town where somebody's riding one of those weird bikes with a big wheel and a small wheel, and people are singing barbershop.
Why do 80% of the people in America live in coastal cities?
Right.
Or more, right? Or what is the statistic?
I don't know what to. It died soon thereafter. Today we have none of this. Like I don't know what our closest version of yearning for a life, a rural life that nobody wants.
Well, we have none of it here in our coastal utopia, but of course this is still the
country radio.
It's the country radio version. It's the support our troops version of like what is best about the country and what has been lost in this great migration to all these immoral cities on the coast where people are doing worse dances. Booty dances.
But you're not seeing this from the young people growing up in these towns. I mean, you're not seeing this from the young adults in these towns.
Well, except
I guess in coded ways you are. If all the songs you listen to on the radio are about your jeans and your trucks and your hound dog and your best girl.
If you are still curving your baseball hat brim instead of wearing it flat, I mean that has become the ultimate cultural signal, right? If you have a flat brim on your baseball cap, then you are...
There's a geometric angle.
Yeah,
there's a quadratic equation that represents the difference between rural and urban America.
But if you curl it, I mean, basically you can judge the amount of hickitude of somebody by how curled that hat brim is.
That would be interesting if you could try to write the parabolic equation.
Yeah.
For here's the amount at which you've chanted "lock her up" at a rally, and here's the amount at which.
And a lot of it is based on having to take your hat off and put it in your back pocket to go into church.
I never even realized that.
Yeah,
that's the origin of it.
Yeah, you curl it because you got to tuck it in somewhere when you take your hat off to respect your elders.
But this is within our lifetime.
Yeah.
Like even you and I grew up in an era where the heartland was represented by a good liberal like Bruce Springsteen, of course, would put his hat in his back pocket, but then rant about the capitalists shutting the factory down.
Sure, and live in New Jersey.
Yeah, he was a fake.
But we watched Hee Haw. I mean, I sat there religiously consuming Hee Haw enough that I know all of Minnie Pearl's best lines.
I think that was just the coincidence of that being programmed for old people in syndication, and then you and I just it was the only thing where people were telling vaudeville-style jokes that kids could get.
Right.
Yeah,
there was no swears.
Because all the variety shows had been canceled, so this was the last one.
Carol Burnett got a lot of laughs from, like, innuendo. There was no innuendo on Hee Haw.
Absolutely. There's cleavage, though. I think we talked about this in the Rural Purge show. Hee Haw had more cleavage than any other American show before or since, maybe in total.
God bless it.
So Henry Ford is successful in getting square dancing into the schools, and it spawns people like Lloyd Pappy Shaw, who is a Colorado Springs principal who becomes very enthusiastic about just the pedagogical power of Promenade and Do-Si-Do and Alamand Left.
And how does that work? How does that teach our kids anything other than...
Well, you can appeal to the coordination, the hand-eye coordination it teaches.
All right.
It's a fitness exercise. It's like doing your calisthenics, which I'm sure a lot of schools would have spent the morning doing.
But it's wholesome rather than being out at Lookout Point watching the submarine races.
Yes. It's boys and girls interacting, but in a way you want to visualize as an adult.
Right.
And then you can pretend they're not doing anything else at Makeout Point.
Right. No sex until marriage.
And so Lloyd Pappy Shaw starts a movement of schools having like exhibition teams. And so from 1939 to 1951, he starts this culture of traveling square dance troops that go around and actually compete like an intramural sport. And
so it's like stepping, or I mean, what?
Yeah, exactly.
But maybe stepping evolved simultaneously, or did it? Is it derived from square dancing?
I don't think so.
Clogging?
Like stepping's got to be the same impulse. Like, let's get the young people out of trouble by dancing.
Right.
But in different communities and with a kind of dance that's actually good.
Right.
That would be the main difference, I guess. And at this time, so organizations grow up around what becomes known as MWSD. Modern Western square dancing.
We used to do a lot of MWSD back in the day.
I feel like
at raves.
Yeah, I feel like sitting on a hay barrel or sitting on a hay bale and tapping your foot would be more fun if you were on MWSD.
For sure it would. Your chewing tobacco takes on a whole new tactile.
I'm coming up on that second chaw.
Your tongue is
right
just like
now.
Blah, 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 blah.
And so organizations form to institute MWSD, and like any dance fad, it's easy to learn because someone is telling you, a guy with a fiddle or a voice on a gramophone is telling you what to do at every point. Typically the music would be live. If you could get in a fiddler, you would.
Right.
So a caller is telling you what to do at every point. So it's, there's a very low barrier to entry. So MWSD clubs start up all over the country and start to push this idea that this kind of newly created World War II era
pastiche.
Yeah, chimera hybrid thing is an American folk dance. And it gets a lot of opposition, mostly from dance purists. Anybody who knows about dancing is like, no. There's clogging, there's Texas two-step, there's all these regional square dances, but this is not a square dance. You're just doing some kind of barn or country dancing.
I love that the original hipsters might have been dance purists from the 1930s.
I was doing Texas two-step before it was cool. I was reading a former Library of Congress librarian named Juliet Mangin, who's written a lot about this, and she was the dance purists. She says were angry that these people were endorsing a lifestyle more than a clearly defined form of dance. Like they were redefining square dancing as anything you do with a fiddle and a bale of hay, no matter what the steps are. And so she'd be saying, no, that's just clogging. No, that's just line dancing. That's not even, but that square dancing became, like you're saying, an ethos, a cultural marker.
Yeah.
Instead of an actual bit of choreography.
And it's a version of the melting pot story, the American melting pot, except what is extruded on the other end is a kind of toothpaste.
Yeah, it's not something that ever existed before. Sometimes you take the best of all these traits and you get something good. And I'm not saying square dancing is bad.
But Henry Ford and whatever this process was, like filtered out all the ethnicity, including what would have been Scots-Irish ethnicity, right? But any kind of relationship to African dance or any dance that would be any darker than the family circus.
So this was not a coincidence. Henry Ford, specifically by design, when he says, I want to bring back Americana, what he means is, I hate the jazz age. I don't like the Charleston. I don't like jazz. And he's not just a fuddy-duddy saying, what is with these dances they're doing? He has a theory. Here's a quote from Henry Ford. Popular music is a Jewish monopoly.
Heard that theory. That theory hasn't died.
Maybe you've heard it from musicians. Jazz is a Jewish creation. Have you heard that theory?
Oh, for sure.
Are you always saying that?
Well, I mean, you can't study American music without hearing this argument time and time again that it's been the Jews the whole time. The Nazis made that argument when they outlawed jazz, was that it was a further attempt on the part of the Jews to undermine the purity of Western culture in order to destroy it by creating a generation of libertines that lost their sort of pure, industrious,
moral uprightness,
German and Scandinavian ways.
I was just reading up on this, the kind of the short spate of Hollywood musicals of the 40s that had all black casts. And these movies are great because you can actually see, it was like the only time you can see Lena Horne and Cab Calloway and Louis Armstrong, these amazing dancers and artists of all kinds doing their thing.
Right.
Otherwise, there would be no record of it. But all these movies.
All of the producers were Hollywood Jews.
And the composers as well. Like some of them they came from Broadway musicals. As soon as jazz became the vernacular, all these young composers loved this stuff and they wanted to write stuff in these blues and jazz and soul vernaculars. And so, all these shows, Cabin in the Sky, all these hit shows were written by Jewish musicians and lyricists who just could not wait to take a crack at jazz.
Well, and there's a lot of African-American anti-Semitism that's kind of tied to this idea that their music and culture was exploited by...
Yeah, who were the club owners and the record executives at the time when all these guys were getting paid pennies. Right. So Henry Ford, I'm in the middle of an amazing Henry Ford quote.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Start again.
Jazz is a Jewish creation. The mush, the slush, the sly suggestion, the abandoned sensuousness of sliding notes are of Jewish origin.
Oh, it's a klezmer argument.
It is. It's actually a musical argument, not a business one.
Interesting.
That you're seeing the influence of the of the shtetl when you hear a clarinetist or a saxophonist.
Sure, all these crazy triplets and whoa.
I don't think this is actually true. By the way. But in his mind, this is what he's hearing. Like, oh no, the Jews now have the blacks.
Yeah, right. Well, and I mean, I've heard all kinds of creative arguments about modern art, for instance, being another attempt to subvert. To subvert the rational world and to turn it into this world of what would be like suggestively art that because it needed interpretation became susceptible to a Jewish interpretation, right. Which was a psychological interpretation, which again destabilized culture and government.
As long as this is a painting of a forest, we can all agree Germany has beautiful forests.
Exactly.
But you're just showing me a bunch of squares.
As soon as it's a bunch of globs, then you might as well just throw aristocratic life right out the window.
And that's where you get, I think it's apocryphal, but the story of Goering saying that when he hears the word culture, he reaches for his Browning because he thinks it's all a trap.
Meanwhile,
someone's trying to trick him.
He was taking all the Gauguins and storing them under his mansion.
Yoink. So Henry Ford has black workers. He's got a largely African-American workforce coming up from the South, and he feels like he can stop the jazz age in its tracks if he just has these his working class people who are Scotch-Irish, they're immigrant people, they're black families moving north. If he can just get square dancing to catch on, maybe everything will be okay.
Oh, so he's doing the assimilationist sort of. It doesn't matter where you're from as long as you're a Presbyterian.
As long as you like fiddle music, you're okay. And so this is really how the square dancing boom begins. These clubs start up all over, and in the 20th century, they ran a concerted campaign to get state and eventually federal legislatures to make square dancing an official American folk dance.
Wow.
They're lobbying Congress. America has very few official symbols. States will have a state bird donut and a state fossil and a state marine mammal and a state amphibian. Legislatures love doing this stuff.
But we have a national bird.
We got a bird.
And we have a national, like a seal.
There is we do not have. Oh, I thought I was thinking of the marine mammals.
Not a seal, but a seal, right? A crest.
There's a crest and a anthem and a flag,
right?
And the bald eagle. And there's a few lesser known ones. Congress, in a moment of weakness, made the bison the American mammal.
Okay, I'm with it.
And it made the American beauty rose the national ornamental flower.
I guess
or something.
I knew that.
And that's about it. Except for that, we have resisted the impulse to be like, what's the American casserole? Right. And I assume it's because regionalism makes it very difficult.
Macaroni and cheese with hamburger, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if you try to let Minnesota decide the state casserole, you're going to piss off somebody in the Carolinas who wants sweet potato in it.
Right.
And then that's never going to get out of committee. So the size of America has kept this down.
Turkey dinner is the American dinner.
Turkey dinner.
Turkey dinner.
Gotcha.
You can put a lot of different things in turkey dinner. If you want sweet potato, you can put it in there. I mean, I prefer stuffing.
You're just vague on the side dishes.
You just call it turkey dinner, and everybody's got turkey dinner.
And if you want to picture mac and cheese as a side, you can picture
there it is. Green beans you can put in there.
But
creamed onions if you're a monster.
But there's this concerted attempt to get square dancing now that it has this kind of fake veneer of national approval and, as you were saying, nationalism stamped on it.
Because if you think about it, it's also a very militaristic. I mean, you're basically someone is calling cadence and you're marching in a square.
Right.
So it's
Henry Ford's not wrong. There's not a lot of syncopation or swing.
No,
we're being kept from a lot of sensuous influences when we're square dancing.
It's basically a Napoleonic military strategy.
And so this campaign just goes on for decades. Please, can we just get Congress to make square dancing the national folk dance? And when this fails, I guess at one point in the early Reagan administration, Robert Byrd, DWV,
the great
D-WV-KKK, kind of the last of these great 100-year-old Southern Democrats, is able to get this bill out of committee that for 1 year in 1982, square dancing, this made-up hodgepodge square dancing, will be America's national folk dance.
They quashed the Equal Rights Amendment, and they were like, "What can we do?"
Well, the problem is they only had time for one. They were like, "What should we do today? Should we get the Equal Rights Amendment passed, or should we get a national folk dance?" And Reagan, of course, happily signs this. So for all of 1982, America did have a national folk dance.
Really?
And I believe it happened again in 93, early in the first Bush administration. But except for that, the square dancing people were unable to get this permanently on the books.
So what happened? So it was on there for a little while, but it didn't.
Somebody signed a proclamation.
Right.
I'm sure there were a bunch of square dancers looking over Reagan's shoulder as he's holding the pen.
But Congress had to authorize it, and they never did.
Well, Congress would have had to authorize it in a permanent way. They did authorize it for 1982.
I see.
But nobody wanted to see this as a permanent addition.
Right.
We now have an 8th national symbol, and
it's a little embarrassing.
It's Henry Ford's made-up thing that middle schoolers have to do. So, thwarted by this blockage in Congress, the MWSD clubs ran a very successful campaign on state legislatures. And in fact, most of the states that have made square dancing an official state symbol did so post 1980s.
Whoa.
This is very, very recently to us. This is in our lifetimes. There's been a boomlet of states being lobbied to make square dancing. And I think the subtext is still the same.
Eliminate blockage.
Well, blackage.
Oh.
You guys don't like gangster rap, right? You guys don't you hate your kids' music? Don't you hate to see breakdancing? Don't you hate the lambada?
Sure, get them back in the square.
Don't you hate crunking and twerking? What could be better than
crunking?
For you? I'm now making things up. What could be better than to have this unimpeachably American tradition on your state law books, and nobody knows it's all a fraud.
And that concludes square dancing. Entry 1211.JB2111. Certificate number 42537 in the omnibus. Futurelings, in the unlikely event that social media still exists in your era, and we never would have predicted it lasted this long, and honestly, it didn't. It morphed into something unrecognizable.
Just like square dancing. All it took was one crazy billionaire, except in this case, it was Zuckerberg.
Right. 10 years from now, we still may be tweeting.
We need Zuckerberg to get on the radio show every night and be like, it's the Facebook posting hour with the Zuckerberg Orchestra. Everybody do some good Facebook posts.
Right. Well, it's not going to eliminate the suspicion that the Jews are in charge of the degradation of American society.
I think it's too late for that.
Well, let's hope that Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are long gone and replaced with something moral and American, distinctly American. We're still trying to export our culture to the rest of the world, to Americanize them. And
we haven't made it up yet.
Yeah, we're struggling.
It's like the factory trying to get the product out when you're still putting the finishing touches on it.
That's right. We are still in beta.
We have not figured out what America is definitely in beta. We haven't figured out what our culture is, but you need to have it now.
Anyway, if you want to know what our culture is, it's at Omnibus Project on all social media. Also at Ken Jennings, where he is constantly lobbing grenades into the culture. He's taking on Nancy Pelosi.
I put on my V for Vendetta mask every day, and I crack my knuckles, and I get to work on Twitter.
There you go. You're out there anonymousing. I am at John Roderick, and I'm just I am clean as a whistle. I'm just talking about mini Pearl jokes and
you're thrifting,
quoting the Bible.
You're leaving the G's off your gerunds. It's a good time.
Mm-hmm. I'm also on Instagram, where I promote the belief, the doctrine that everyone on Instagram should periodically, I don't mean all the time, but every once in a while post a selfie, because anyone who's following you does not care about your dog or your flowers or the food you're cooking. What they care about is you, and they want to see your face.
You're a walking, talking monkey selfie.
So every once in a while, I'll post a selfie. I'm not afraid to do it. I'm a middle-aged guy who wants you to see me. Now, I don't really want you to see me. I do it as a public service.
You have attractive privilege. You're a good-looking 50-year-old man.
Come on, that's not true.
No, it is.
I look like a pile of dirty clothes with an uncooked scallop in the middle.
Part of you does, but you cut off the picture above that point. you know what you're doing.
I always frame the picture just right above my little belly.
The scallop line.
Yeah. I'm going to encourage you to email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. We will read your emails, and we're going to comment on them on our bonus episode, available to Patreon contributors. We are at patreon.com/omnibusproject.
If you've been thinking, you know what, I enjoy this endeavor, maybe I should be a contributor. Yeah. Now would be the perfect time, because we've rolled out fabulous perks and prizes.
Right. A new thing that only subscribers can hear, which is Ken and I continuing to dissect whether or not the Jews are bad for America.
They are, by the way, we're on the record that they are not.
They are not.
If we were too ambiguous before.
Right. And if you are going to send us any kind of anti-Semitic theory, be assured we will not read it.
Maybe we shouldn't save that for the outro.
Oh. Okay.
I mean, what I'm saying is, from now on, maybe we should, because what if people don't listen to the outro, and we can just say, well, in the outro, we were very clear that we're not anti-Semites.
Do you think we should put it in the intro? Like, hello, welcome to the Omnibus Project. We are not anti-Semites.
Every single show should start with our deep respect and love for
Once
Judaism.
Again, we would like to reassert.
It's odd that we keep having to do this.
Yes.
But just for the record.
We got another letter. You can go to our Facebook group and hang out with the Futurelings, who are great. They're hilarious. And you can send us raw materials. You can send us your rare earths, your the makings of complex chemistries and bomb-making materials. Do not send us bomb-making materials. You can send us your grandfather's old Krugerrands that he left to you in a box that you're not sure what to do with. To P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155.
Futurelings, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe that will end us all may never come. But if the worst comes soon, this recording, like all our recordings, could be our very final word to you. But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.
Why do you travel?
To recover from heartbreak, to trace your DNA,
Escape the internet? On our podcast, A Way to Go, we've been exploring all the reasons we travel. I'm Geraldine Gerba.
I'm Pavia Rosati, and together we're the founders of travel website Fathom.
And we've already heard so many great stories.
Such as
an actress in rural Kenya explaining the ins and outs of safe sex.
A graffiti artist tagging the islands of Southeast Asia.
A producer arranging high-fashion photo shoots in the desert.
Listen to A Way to Go on the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.